Good morning. We're back to our series, Behind the Scenes. This is lesson number 3. I'm thinking about, I probably need to rename this, what I just think of, Battle for the Earth, because that's what I'm really going to show you here that's going on. I'm going to recap our first 2 lessons first. This is going to help us at where we are right now, and living in what we're living in right now in the earth, in the world. It's a global thing that's going on, right? And we know our God is going to win. And but this I think this will help us. We get this background in here. This is great stuff that I've been able to, the Lord's been able to show me through some readings and then in addition some things that He's shown me. So I'm recapping. You got to be patient because it takes me a little bit to lay this background. Okay, so first of all, we said that Jesus Christ has been given authority over the earth, over heaven and earth, as stated in Matthew 28:18. And so we said, well, if He's been given authority over the earth, why don't we see it? Well, obviously we know that when Christ is manifested, when He comes, we're going to rule and reign with Him on the earth. Revelation 5 says that. And that's foreshadowed in several of the teachings of Christ in Matthew 25, and let's see where the other one, in Matthew 19. Matthew 19:28, Matthew 25, 31 to 32, where Jesus is saying, when the Son of Man returns in His glory, you're going to sit with me and judge the 12 tribes of Israel. And then the other one in Matthew 25 is where He's saying, when the Son of Man returns in His glory, all the nations are going to be gathered before Him. Sheep are going to go on His right. The goat nations are going to go on His left. And I believe that passage refers to, He says, to the least of these who gave me a drink of water to my brethren. Who gave a drink of water to my brethren. I believe He's talking about the Jews. Those are His brethren. And whoever treated the Jews, whichever nation honored the Jews and the call on their nation by God, will be sheep nations. That's a whole other teaching. Anyway, we're going to go to, so I'm going to keep going. So we looked at that. We looked at Jesus is going to have authority over the earth. He's already been given authority. We're going to see it one day. And then, we said, well, what's the big deal about having authority over the earth? We're going to look at that. Why? We talked about these passages where for instance, 1 Kings 20:23, the Syrian army was defeated royally by King Ahab of Israel. And, really swiftly. And so they said, the reason why they defeated us is because their gods are gods of the hills. If we fight them in the plains, we'll win. Right? You remember that? So keep that in mind. Then there's also, remember that in Daniel 10, verse 13, the angel who came to Daniel after he had been praying and seeking the Lord for his people, his nation, the angel who came to him said, I would have been here, your prayer was heard from the day you started, but I would have been here earlier, but the kings of Persia opposed me. And then later in the same chapter, he says, I now got to go back and fight against, now this is an angel speaking, I fight against the king, the prince of Persia, and the prince of Greece. So these are supernatural entities, because the angel is a supernatural entity, and he's going back to do more battle. And he's obviously been battling in the spiritual realm before he got to Daniel, right? So this is that battle that's going on in the second heaven. Ooh, this is lots of good subjects here. Anyway, we're going to continue the review. We talked about the heavenly scene and the players around the throne of God. And we talked about the spirits angels being called spirits in Hebrew, so we can interchange those two words. We talked about these angels and spirits interchangeably, however we want to say those things, have access to the throne of God. We talked about several instances, in Revelation where we see all these angels around the throne. And then I want to bring in another one that's where there are 4 spirits of heaven who are sent out from their station before the Lord of all the earth. which we see in Zechariah 6. Zechariah 6, verse 5. These horses are going out. Zechariah the prophet sees horses coming between two bronze mountains, and he asks about who they are. And he says, the angel says, these are four spirits of heaven sent out from their station before the Lord of all the earth. So there you go, these spirits of heaven. We talked about the seven spirits who stand before God, which we asked, could these be, or the seven angels who stand before God, could these be the same seven angels as the seven spirits of God later in Revelation, and also found in Isaiah 11, where we see the seven spirits who are upon the branch of God, which we know is Christ. So anyway, I'm just getting us a review here on what we've gone over. And then we ended with some introductory truths about the biblical figure Satan, which is Satan in Hebrew, which means adversary, simply means adversary. And we talked about the fact that the capital letters are not in the Hebrew and the Greek, so the English translators capitalize this word adversary as a person. Okay, Satan being a proper name or something. Okay, but the ancient Jew only knew that there was a figure, that there was this, the adversary stood up to oppose Israel and incited David to number Israel. That's 1 Chronicles 21, I believe. Yeah, 21:1. And we talked about the angel of the Lord, who in fact stood up. How is it worded? Against Balaam and the donkey. He took his stand as a Satan, literally in the Hebrew. He took his stand as a Satan against him, Numbers 22:22. So Satan was a common word meaning adversary. We don't know till later that he's the deceiver of the whole world, the serpent of old. We don't find that out really until the book of Revelation. So that's the background. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more of who is Satan. So we really get the clue, the biggest clue from Job 1:6-12. And Job, we said, is thought by many scholars to be the oldest book that we have in the Bible. So we know from Job 1:6-12 and from Zechariah 3:1-2 that this Satan has access to the throne of God, at least on some occasions. So we're going to read Job 1, because we're going to really look at this carefully. Job 1, starting with verse 6 and going through 12. Excuse me. So it says, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? So Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro throughout the earth. Now, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. Now, this sounds to me like Zechariah 6 there that I just quoted from, because he says, these are four spirits of heaven sent out into all the earth from their station before the Lord of all the earth. And, and then these four horses go out walking to and fro. They go to and fro throughout the earth. These four spirits of heaven represented by horses. So this is all interesting. Okay, continuing on, verse 8. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? That there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. So Satan, adversary in Hebrew, so adversary answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household? Now again, this is where we know that this is a personage. We know it from Job. We didn't know it from 1 Chronicles 21:1, where adversary stood up to oppose David, although there was no person mentioned there. So you could assume adversary must be a person. I mean, he stood up to oppose Israel. But Job is enlightening us, and this is the oldest book. And so the Jew would have been familiar, the Jewish ancient Jew would be familiar with this book of Job, I'm assuming. At least the scholars would have been, or the what do you call them? The scribes. So anyway, continuing verse 9, Job 1. So Satan answered the Lord and said, adversary answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household and around all that he has on every side. You bless the work of his hands. His possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he'll surely curse you to your face. And then the Lord, Yahweh, said to Satan, Behold, all that he has is in your power, but do not lay your hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. Now I want to go into Satan came also to present. In verse 6 we see the sons of God who come to present themselves before Yahweh. And Satan, adversary, also came among them. Where is this part? Okay, this phrase, came among them, is very interesting because in the Hebrew, this word for among, or came, you could translate it, came in the midst of them, is from the word to sever. As any one thing has to be split in two or severed in order for something to be inserted in the middle of it. And it's the word used in Genesis 10 of the cutting of the animals. You know, when, it's not Genesis 10, I think it's Genesis 12. Genesis 15, where Abraham splits the animals to offer the sacrifices. Yes, Genesis 15, where Abraham, he says he split the animals. It's a separation. You have to make a split in something for something to be inserted in the middle. Satan, from the very beginning, here we go in Job, he inserted himself among the sons of God. Now we're going to talk about these sons of God. This is one of our very main points. Does that make you think of the sons of God who mated with the daughters of women, or daughters of man, in Genesis 6? Because it should, because we're going to look at who are these sons of God. But anyway, Satan inserted himself in the middle. So the divisiveness, the divisive nature of this adversary figure. Now, we're looking at this purely from the Hebrew meanings and from the world view of the people who wrote these things and who would have read these things when just after they happened or a few centuries after they happened, okay? So that was fascinating to me, that adversary shows up in the middle, in the split place of these sons of God. He's been splitting, he's been dividing, he's been seeking to bring strife and division since he existed, and he was a creation of God. And we'll look at all that. We see that in Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, I believe. We'll look at all that. But anyway, and I'll point out a couple more things from this passage. I've got a couple more minutes here. Keep it under 15, I hope. Let's see. Now, verses 13 to 22, which we won't read right now, but we're going to read it. Well, let's read it. 13 to 22. So there was a day when when his sons, Job's sons and daughters, were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And this is after Satan has been given authority to do with Job whatever he wants to, except to touch his person, his body. Or I guess to kill his body, because he did end up touching his body. A messenger came to Job and said the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them. Then the Sabeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I am alone and left to tell you. So Satan had power to bring a raiding band from Africa. The Sabeans were a people in Africa to kill the servants of Job. While he was still speaking, another came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Here Satan has the power to bring fire from heaven to destroy Job's sheep and servants, tending the sheep, I suppose. Do you remember in Revelation 13, this false prophet has power to call down fire from heaven. Okay, so there's a little parallel. Now, verse 17. While he was still speaking, another came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels, and took them away. Yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you." And while he was still speaking, another also came and said, "Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind from across the desert came and struck the four corners of the house, fell on the young people. They are all dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you." So a wind, Satan had power to bring a wind to destroy a house. Remember when the wind tried to destroy Jesus and his disciples on the Sea of Galilee, the big storm? So we're going to talk more. I'm going to keep these short, so I want to end on that. We'll take up lesson 4 tomorrow. Bless you. Love you guys.